I have put in hundreds of applications. I've gone on numerous interviews. I did go on an interview, and everything was going well with the interview, but the woman came out and she happened to see the sheet that said, "Have you ever been convicted?" And when I put yes and I explained in loose terms what happened, her response to me before I even got the interview, she was like, "Charmel, you know, we really had something for you. You know, we knew we could have really used you, but you know, we have a protocol, and our protocol doesn't allow us to hire people with a background."
While we're talking, his eyes is glancing down the paper. Yeah, okay, Mr. Jordan. And when he got to the box, you know, his whole demeanor changed. I'm trying to get the most probably filthiest, grimiest, sneakiest job you can get for the lowest pay. And you told me I'm not good enough for that. I'm not good enough to clean the toilet because I have a criminal record.
Across the country, individuals are routinely asked to check a box on job applications indicating whether they've been arrested or convicted of a crime. Every day, the applications of countless qualified job seekers who check that box are immediately thrown into the trash by employers. The number of people across the country affected by this practice is staggering. About 65 million U.S. adults have been arrested or convicted of a crime. That's more than 1 in 4 Americans. A movement to help the formerly convicted get a fair chance at employment is sweeping the country. Hawaii, New Mexico, Minnesota, Connecticut, and Massachusetts all have banned the box. 5 other states have proposed similar laws, and more than 25 cities across the U.S. have enacted this protection. On March 31, 2011, Philadelphia joined this movement by banning the box on most private and public employment applications. City Councilwoman Donna Reed Miller introduced this legislation.
We always thought that if we could get that question off and give people an opportunity to talk about who they are, their knowledge, skills, and abilities, then they could have a better chance of obtaining employment.
The employer is not permitted to ask in their application whether an individual was arrested or convicted of any offense, nor is the employer permitted to make any personal inquiries, and an inquiry could be an internet search, a criminal background check, until after the employer has conducted at least one interview.
Ban the box legislation is an important step, but more is needed. This problem goes beyond the initial application.
We call this ban the box not just a legislation, but it's a movement. It's a social movement. It's going to have impact on families, have impact on poverty, and it's going to have an impact on the recidivism rate.
So in the past 3 decades or so, there has been this incredible growth in the criminal justice system. The number of people that are incarcerated has grown roughly 7-fold. So there are now more than 2 million people behind bars and nearly 700,000 people that are being released each year from prison.
Pennsylvania is the leading state in locking people up. So unfortunately, we have many folks that are affected by this bill and this problem.
Just here in the city of Philadelphia, you have 300,000 formerly convicted people. 200,000 is no longer on probation or parole. They may have been crime-free for 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years.
In the incarceration process, you have the audacity to use my body to do work. Like going to North Carolina, you work at the state building, you work on the highways and things of this nature, and then when you come home, you can't even get a job in PennDOT.
Criminal records issues is one of, if not the largest barrier to employment to low-wage workers now in Philadelphia. In the 11 years I've been at CLS, the number of cases of people coming in with criminal records-related issues has tripled.
More people get probation than incarceration, okay? And people who receive probation are faced with the exact same discrimination that people who get incarcerated.
We see a lot of people who come to us and say, we had an easier time getting employment right out of prison 15 years ago than we are right now. That is because employers are using criminal background checks on a routine basis.
You go on the internet and you see all these things, background check, this, that, and the other thing. It's so easy to look up somebody's record, and it's oftentimes not accurate at all.
Many times we notice there's missing date of births, social security numbers, so it's the wrong person, but a similar name. And employers are making decisions based on this, which is a real problem.
Criminal background checks typically report anything that is in a person's history, even arrests, which are not proven criminal activity, but are just, the suspicion of criminal activity.
Once the person hit the yes box, 9 times out of 10, they don't get called or they don't get an interview.
I was convicted of a crime 32 years ago, found not guilty, and it's still affected my life. No employment, and it's just rough. It's been rough, And I think that's a long time to hold something against a person.
Without a doubt, there are people who are convicted of a crime who didn't do it. There are even people who plead guilty to a crime who didn't do it. There are a lot of reasons people plead guilty.
Sometimes it's easier just to say you're guilty than to fight the crime, especially when you don't have a lot of money. And therefore, you get something on your record, you don't go to jail, and you think, this isn't going to hurt me. It could very well be that the person just wasn't going to fight it, because if you go before a jury, you can get into even bigger trouble. So you have to keep an open mind.
Mm-hmm. They want to plead to it because the district attorney is offering a probation sentence or maybe a fine only, and they want to get this over with. They always want to get it over with and get on with their lives. And they don't really stop to think about the implication of it, that you're gonna travel through the rest of your life with this record.
In Pennsylvania, a conviction stays on an individual's record forever. People can apply for pardons down the line. They usually have to wait 5 years after a misdemeanor conviction, probably 10 years after a felony conviction, and pardons are not guaranteed.
The pardon process is very difficult in Pennsylvania. I think that that's probably true throughout the country. It takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years for the process to conclude, and only several hundred people out of several thousand of people that have applied for a pardon receive that pardon.
The problem of hiring restrictions on formerly convicted people disproportionately affects people who are poor, because 80% of criminal defendants are low income. The problem is exacerbated if you're a minority, because minorities are disproportionately impacted at all stages of the criminal justice process.
First, you're more likely to be stopped if you're a minority. Second, you're more likely to be arrested. Third, you're more likely to be held without bail or have a bail that's too high. Fourth, you're more likely to be convicted. And then you're more likely to go to prison. There is a disproportionate impact right through the system.
So I've conducted a series of field experiments in which I've hired groups of young men to pose as job applicants and send them all over the city applying for real low-wage jobs with resumes that reflect identical levels of education and work experience. Within each team, I randomly assign a criminal record to one applicant for the first set of job searches, and then have that team switch off. And so we find that across the board, a criminal record is incredibly debilitating. Applicants with a criminal record are about half as likely to receive a callback or job offer relative to equally qualified non-offenders. Some of the findings in my research that were most surprising had to do with just the effects of racial discrimination, independent of the issue of criminal records. So a black applicant with no criminal background fared no better than a white applicant just out of prison. So race is one of those characteristics that employers seem to use as a proxy for employability. That then combined with a criminal record seems to intensify the stigma and basically eliminates virtually all possibilities of employment for that group of people.
While lawmakers and advocates in Philadelphia are fighting for necessary protections beyond ban the box, there already exist basic restrictions on how employers may consider an applicant's criminal record.
Basically, Title VII has been interpreted to require an employer, if they're going to use a criminal record, to look at the nature and gravity of the offense, how much time has passed since the conviction or incarceration with the nature of the job. Throughout my involvement through the expungement process, it is clear that employers are violating that law.
Employers in Pennsylvania also routinely violate state law, which similarly limits employers to considering only those convictions that are job-related. This means that a sex offense would restrict you from working with children, but it wouldn't categorically prohibit you from all forms of employment. A drunk driving conviction may be related to a job as a truck driver, but not as a secretary.
Even though I had a criminal conviction, I never was fired from my job. They allowed me to continue to work, and the sentence allowed me to serve the 30 days on the weekends. The downsizing of my company was the reason why I got laid off, not anything due to my conviction. My conviction and the crime was in 2001 and 2002. I was not released from my job until 2009. The conviction has been the hindrance for me finding a job at this time. I can still clearly get an interview, but at that point they will have you fill out an application, and at that same time they're asking for you to give permission to run a background check. And usually after that point in which they run the background check, then I'm disqualified from being applicable for that position.
To forever foreclose a permissible means of gainful employment because of an improvident act in the distant past completely loses sight of any concept of forgiveness for prior errant behavior, and adds yet another stumbling block along the difficult road of rehabilitation. And not only do we talk about rehabilitation, but also we're talking about funds and taxes and money and public safety. All of those aspects are intertwined in this issue, and that's why it's such an important civil rights issue.
Felony convictions trigger a wide range of legal and social restrictions.
It affects not only one's ability to become employed, but that has a kind of a ripple effect.
When individuals do not get a fair chance, they cannot provide for their families. They cannot afford safe housing and struggle to afford food, clothing, and other basic necessities. Barred from public housing, their family may be split apart. With no hope and diminished self-esteem, these individuals are more likely to end up abusing alcohol or other substances, or getting caught back up in criminal activity. In fact, 65% of those who don't find employment within 3 years of returning to society end up back in the criminal justice system. The population of Philadelphia is about 1.5 million. 1/5 of our population, about 300,000 individuals, have records. And if each of these individuals is responsible for just one person, whether a spouse, a child, or a parent, that 300,000 becomes 600,000. That's almost half the city's population. The effects of prohibiting just one person from getting a job are exponential.
I couldn't, get a job. And it brought me down. Because I couldn't take care of my family, I couldn't be a husband, and I couldn't be a father. And everything came down on me, and I wound up getting divorced. I became homeless, I lost my wife, my family, I lost everything.
A mother who has 3 children, is not able to afford a safe environment for her children, tries to apply for safe public housing and is rejected because of her conviction. Where is that person supposed to go then?
Now you done subjected the children that had nothing to do with anything. Now you done subjected them to a lifelong life of poverty because of something that their father or their mother may have done.
I got so frustrated, I started to drink. And that didn't help. It takes away the pain of not being employed. You don't have to think about it for a little while, but reality sets in soon, and then you continue the next day doing the same thing to escape reality.
It works with your self-esteem. It works with your ego. A lot of people, I find myself depressed a lot. Depressed, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. Because I'm trying so hard just to get back, to get my foot in the door.
One of the strongest predictors of desistance from crime or moving away from a life of crime is finding quality, steady employment.
Someone that committed a crime and has been crime-free for 7 years is less likely to offend than someone that has not committed a crime at all.
So the ex-offenders that are able to find jobs are much less likely to engage in crime, to be arrested or reincarcerated.
What is happening in our society is that we've got this class of individuals who, because they've made a mistake, maybe a couple of mistakes, are forever being banned and restricted from employment.
I mean, and people that I don't think really stop to understand how that system really kind of sets you up for failure and sets you up to become that self-fulfilling prophecy of offending again.
In order to feed their families, they have to be able to have a job, have to be able to make money. And if they can't get a job, then they're going to resort to other means to get that money. And a lot of times, it leads right back to crime.
And I think we as a society believe in redemption, we believe in second chances, and yet some of these collateral consequences that we attach to criminal records means that once you've made a mistake, you will never have an opportunity to get beyond that mistake.
People say that you've paid your debt to society. You paid your debt. If I borrowed $5 from Wayne and I paid him back, he's not looking at me like, oh, you still owe me money. I paid my debt. And you got to look at this situation the same way. People have paid their debt. We have to be serious about second chances.
It is to the betterment of this whole city that everybody get a fair and equal opportunity towards work.
Where do you think this tax money is going to? If we don't find other ways in which to employ and educate people that have gone down that wrong path from the beginning, if we fail to do that, it's only going to become more expensive. And we're paying for it.
I am trained as an administrative assistant.
I'm a chess player, so I've taught chess to kids.
I was an executive assistant to the director at the Wharton School.
I worked in a barber shop.
I put myself through school for medical billing. I worked for the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf.
Butcher shop.
I was an office manager.
Human services for 17 years.
I feel that my resume is impressive.
I have a lot of experience behind me, and I'm good at what I do.
So I'm good at what I do. I just need the opportunity to be able to deliver what I know.
There are employers in Philadelphia who already recognize the skills and commitment that the formerly convicted can contribute to the workplace.
As far as we're concerned, our employment pool is that 2-mile circle around our stores. If there's Muslim people, we hire the Muslim people. If there's African-American people, we hire African-American people. If there's ex-offenders, we hire ex-offenders. Those are our customers, and therefore they should be our associates.
We would not exclude someone unless it was job-related.
Right.
And that's what the state law is.
Our position always has been is we want to hire the best available candidate. And that person may or may not have a conviction.
I think we just think it's very important to give people a chance at employment when they've paid their debt to society. If we have unemployed ex-offenders surrounding Temple, how is that going to help our neighborhood?
You know, you get paid back tenfold in the community. People all recognize what we do for them, and therefore they spend their money here. And if you're an employer that jumps on board and says, you know what, if I'm going to make this area a better place, a safer place, a more well-rounded community, you know, you got to fix the problem. And the problem is if a person can't get a job ever, they're really left to the only alternative is to do illegal things.
A lot of employers, they find that these are people who really want to work. They're very committed to the jobs that they get. They feel very thankful that they've been able to get a job.
That's the first thing people say about formerly convicted people is that you can't outwork them.
Given the opportunity, they will rise to the occasion. And I mean, we've had employees here. The same thing is true. The two people who run our reentry programs had served time in prison. I mean, they are just wonderful people. They bring such wonderful background to this work. They really do an impressive job.
We find success with it because we have people that really, they just show such appreciation.
They come ready to work. They come with the right attitude.
These employers also find that many of the common fears about liability for hiring the formerly convicted are unfounded.
When you hire anyone, you what they did before may or may not be a good indicator of what's going to happen.
Anybody, whether they have a criminal background or not, could potentially do something that's not right.
A common misconception about the Ban the Box initiative is that it gives the formerly convicted an unfair advantage.
It's not saying that employers should actively recruit or hire ex-offenders ahead of people that have not gotten a conviction on their record. It's just saying in the initial stage of the employment process, we might want to view these applicants equally.
For us, it doesn't really become an issue that somebody would say, well, it's unfair that you're giving an ex-offender a leg up. I mean, we're really not. We're just saying we're open to all people. That's all we're saying.
And I've seen so many people who come out of prison who really do want to make a change.
They may have been violent years ago and could have been an alcoholic or something, drinking, and now they're clean and sober and, just want to live their life. They could have been without children then. Now they're more responsible adults at this time.
When you say, okay, you know what, we've punished this person enough, let's give them that chance.
I think everybody deserves a fair shot at a job.
During the filming of this documentary, Leroy Brown overcame the obstacles to employment that he had faced for years and founded his own recovery house in North Philadelphia.
I was addicted to drugs, and it took a while for me to come out of it. And when I did, I ran into a lot of problems. I ran into a lot of problems sober. I couldn't afford housing, so I had to live in a recovery house. So once I got the opportunity to get out and to do something on my own, then I took that opportunity, and I want to try to have the best transitional house. I want to have a nice place for people to live in and feel welcome, feel at home. I want them to have a better place than I had,
I would love to see people be a little more open-minded and kind and charitable when it comes to our fellow citizens, and especially those who may have had a difficult time and may have become involved with the law. There's always a good chance that they are at a point in their lives where they really want to turn things around.